What if the personality you've been showing the world for the last 20 years isn't actually your personality at all?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Like what if it's just a highly tuned survival mechanism?
Right, because we usually treat our traits as these, fixed biological facts, like you're the funny one or the organized one.
The relentless driver who always gets things done.
Exactly. And it is incredibly jarring to consider that these defining characteristics might just be intricate suits of armor, stuff we built when we were, frankly, too young to know any better.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a really hard look at a daily routine so aggressively still that it practically forces you to figure out who you actually are under all that armor.
Yeah, it leaves you nowhere to hide.
Right. We are pulling from this fascinating recent Black Talks conversation featuring Ram and Vaneque, who is a faith and femininity coach. And they tackle this concept they call unshakable alignment, the journey to inner peace.
Which is such a powerful phrase. Unshakable alignment.
It really is. So our mission for this deep dive is to extract the actual practical mechanics of finding that peace. We want to outline a concrete daily plan, starting with a morning habit that sounds deceptively simple.
Deceptively being the key word there.
Oh, absolutely. And then we'll move into the heavy lifting of how to identify and strip away the false habits that just clutter up our lives.
The title itself, Unshakable Alignment, it kind of gives away the ultimate goal. I mean, they aren't talking about that fragile, temporary calm you get from, taking a bubble bath or going on a weekend vacation.
Right, the kind that vanishes the second you open your email.
Exactly. They are talking about a structural, foundational state of being, one that holds its integrity even when the environment around you is completely chaotic.
hmm
But building that kind of structural integrity, it requires a total rejection of how we typically manage our psychological bandwidth.
Okay, let's unpack this because our default state is usually 0 to 60 in half a second. You wake up, the alarm blares, and you are instantly launched into the atmosphere of your obligations.
You're just reacting.
Yeah, action equals productivity. We've completely normalized this idea that hitting the ground running is the only valid way to start a day. It's like starting a marathon by doing a full-speed sprint out your front door. You're exhausted before the race even really begins.
And it's actually worse than just being normalized. It's biologically reinforced.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, when we wake up, there is this natural spike in cortisol, the stress hormone, to basically get us conscious and moving.
Okay, that makes sense.
But instead of letting that naturally taper off, what do? We immediately grab our phones, we start running through our to-do lists, we literally hijack our own nervous systems.
We're choosing the stress.
We are. We trade that baseline morning calm for an immediate hit of manageable anxiety.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the very first and honestly probably the most difficult step that Ram advocates for in this daily plan. To achieve unshakable inner peace, you have to completely break that morning launch sequence.
You have to slam the brakes.
Exactly. He suggests an ideal goal of 30 minutes of quiet time every single morning. But, he's realistic. He knows we're essentially addicts to the noise.
Oh, 100%.
So he advises starting with just 5 minutes. And the parameters for those 5 minutes are absolute.
Right. There's no wiggle room here. You don't turn on the lights. You don't reach for a device. You literally just put your feet on the floor, sit on the edge of the bed, take deep breaths, and say, thank you.
Just intentionally depriving your brain of any external stimulation.
Yes. And Ram warns that your mind is going to put up a massive fight against this.
Oh, I can feel the resistance just thinking about it. Your brain instantly demands the to-do list. And we usually frame this as a modern attention span issue, right? Our brains are just broken by TikTok and screens and we can't focus anymore.
That's the common narrative, yeah.
Yeah. But listening to Ram and Vaneque, it sounds like there's a much more insidious mechanism at play here. Is this intense resistance to just sitting in the dark really an attention span issue? Or is it something deeper about avoiding ourselves?
What's fascinating here is that the avoidance is actually a highly protective instinct.
Protective? How does rushing around protect us?
Well, yes, technology fractures our attention, sure. But the core issue is psychological safety. The mind actually prefers the chaotic safety of an overflowing inbox over the quiet threat of introspection.
Oh, wow. The quiet threat.
Yeah, because think about it. If you are constantly processing external data, emails, errands, the news, you don't have the mental bandwidth available to process internal data. The noise of productivity acts as an acoustic dampener.
It drowns it all out.
Exactly. It completely blocks out the heavy, uncomfortable truths about your life or your relationships or, just your baseline happiness.
So by rushing around in a panic every morning, we are essentially running away from our own internal monologue. Busyness isn't just this annoying byproduct of modern life. It's an anesthetic we self-administer to numb the quiet.
That is a perfect way to put it, because when you sit in the dark with your feet on the floor doing nothing but breathing, the anesthetic wears off.
And the pain comes back.
Right.
Right.
Whatever you have been successfully ignoring through sheer momentum is suddenly going to speak up. So that friction you feel in those 5 minutes, that intense crawling out of your skin itch to just get up and do something, it isn't boredom.
It's panic.
That is your nervous system panicking because the protective shield of busyness has just been lowered.
Which leads directly into the psychological deep end here. If the noise is protecting us from uncomfortable truths, what exactly happens when we push past that panic and actually sit in the silence?
This is where it gets real.
Yeah, this is where Vaneque brings in a profoundly heavy observation from her daily work coaching women. She says when people commit to this intentional, concentrated inner work, they hit an identity crisis.
A massive one. They realize the person they present to the world is largely a fabrication.
Right. She points out that people's personalities, the way they operate, the way they speak, their automatic reactions, are frequently constructs built entirely out of trauma and neglect.
It is a devastating realization for a lot of people. I mean, you spend decades thinking you are just this naturally hyper-independent person who doesn't need anyone's help.
Right. I'm just strong.
Exactly.
Cool.
Only to sit in the silence and realize that hypo-independence is just a defense mechanism you built. Because at a formative age, the people you relied on let you down.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me push back on this a little. Because, I'm a naturally fast talker, and I like my calendar to be meticulously organized. Are we saying every single quirky trait or preference is a trauma response?
No, I don't.
Because that feels like a massive leap. How are you, just by sitting in the dark for 5 minutes, supposed to distinguish between a genuine, hardwired personality quirk and a behavior that was built out of childhood neglect?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to the function the behavior serves. And this is key, how your body feels when you're prevented from doing it.
Okay, explain that.
The Silence REM and Vaneque are advocating for acts as an acoustic mirror. In our day-to-day lives, that perpetual go, go, go lifestyle forces us into a low-grade survival mode. And in survival mode, you don't present your authentic soul. You wear whatever armor is necessary to avoid getting hurt.
So to use my hyper-organized example, if I'm organizing my calendar because I genuinely enjoy the process and it gives me a sense of peace, that's my personality.
Right. It feels light.
But if the thought of a blank space on the calendar sends me into a spiral of anxiety because unpredictability felt physically dangerous to me when I was 8 years old, then the organization is the armor.
Exactly. And you can't tell the difference between the armor and your actual skin while you are actively defending yourself in the middle of a chaotic Tuesday.
You're too busy surviving.
Yes. It is only in that dedicated quiet time, the dark room, feet on the floor, no immediate threats, that your primitive survival mechanisms recognize they are finally safe. The defensive systems power down.
And then what?
Well, in that stillness, you begin to observe your own thoughts without the immediate pressure to react to them. The silence allows you to ask the crucial question, do I actually like being this way? Or have I just been doing this to stay safe?
Wow. That brings up a terrifying visual. It's like wearing a heavy, wet winter coat indoors for so many years that you completely forget you even have it on.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You just assumed that heaviness, that restricted movement, was your natural body weight, and the morning silence is what finally makes you notice the coat.
But noticing the code is only the first part of the equation, right? Vaneque framework moves from observation into active detoxification. Because recognizing that you were wearing trauma-built armor doesn't magically make the armor fall off.
No, you have to actively take it off.
You have to actively dismantle it.
Which brings us to the next part of this daily plan, the detox phase. This is where she talks about specifically identifying and removing what she calls false pleasures and counterfeit loves.
Such evocative terms.
Truly, these are the habits, the coping mechanisms, and sometimes even the relationships in our lives that simply aren't authentic to who we actually are beneath the mask. But she doesn't just define them as, like, bad habits. She frames them as things that actively damage us while pretending to save us.
Right. They are essentially chemical patches for the trauma mask. A counterfeit love mimics the feeling of safety or validation that your authentic self is starved for. But because it is counterfeit, it never actually nourishes the root.
So what does this all mean? It makes me think of drinking salt water when you're stranded in the ocean. It mimics what you need, water, but ultimately leaves you more dehydrated and desperate.
Or like an autoimmune response, where the body's defense mechanism gets confused and starts attacking the healthy tissue it was originally meant to protect.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it. So a counterfeit love is like your brain seeking out a toxic dynamic because the chaos of that dynamic feels familiar. And to a traumatized nervous system, familiarity is easily mistaken for safety.
Exactly. That is a much more accurate way to look at it than just calling it a bad habit. It is a misdirected survival instinct.
Like seeking validation from strangers online.
Yes, it's the validation we desperately seek on social media to patch a core wound of feeling unseen. Or it's the compulsive overworking we do to prove our worth to a boss because our mask is the hyper-competent one who only earns love through utility.
Man, that hits close to home.
Right. These false pleasures provide an immediate, fleeting spike of relief, but they require a massive long-term metabolic cost to your spirit.
But practically speaking, this raises a question about the daily plan. How does the morning habit sitting in the dark with our feet on the floor actually translate to identifying a counterfeit love later in the day?
How do the two connect?
Yeah, because when the lights are off at 6 a.m., I'm not scrolling social media for validation or arguing with a toxic friend. I'm just breathing. So how does the dark room fix the bright, loud problems that happen at 2 p.m.?
This raises an important question about how our sensory input works. It creates a baseline of contrast.
Contrast.
Yeah. Think about trying to locate a subtle, rhythmic ticking sound in the engine of your car while you're driving down a gravel road with the radio blasting.
It's impossible.
It's totally impossible. The environment is way too loud. Your daily life is that gravel road. But if you take that exact same car, park it in a completely silent garage, and turn off the radio, that ticking sound becomes glaringly obvious. It dominates your attention.
So the 5 minutes of silence in the morning isn't meant to solve the problem right in that moment. It is meant to calibrate your internal sensors.
Precisely. When you strip away the chaotic environment of your busy life every single morning and establish a baseline of complete stillness, you're learning what your nervous system feels like when it is actually at rest.
You're finding your baseline.
You begin to memorize the frequency of your authentic self.
And then you carry that memorized frequency with you into the afternoon.
You do. So when you carry the peace you cultivated in the morning into your workday, and suddenly you engage in a false pleasure, say, you agree to take on a massive project you definitely don't have time for just to please someone else.
The people-pleasing kicks in.
Right. The internal friction you feel is immediate and unmistakable. Because you now know what your baseline of peace feels like, the counterfeit habit feels jagged. It feels out of tune.
Because you aren't numb to it anymore.
Exactly. Without the constant low-grade panic of busyness to hide in, these false habits stand out, making it possible to systematically identify them and strip them away.
You recognize the counterfeit before you even fully engage with it because you finally remember what authenticity feels like. I mean, that is an incredibly powerful mechanism.
It's life-changing.
But stripping away those falsehoods, peeling off that wet winter coat, that is not a one-time magic trick. You don't just sit in the dark on a Tuesday, realize you're a people pleaser, and suddenly your entire life is cured.
Oh, I wish. But no.
Right, because letting go of a survival mechanism usually involves a significant amount of grief. That mask kept you safe when you really needed it.
It requires a committed, continuous effort, which is exactly why Ram and Vaneque frame this as a journey toward unshakable alignment. It is an ongoing process of building emotional and spiritual stamina.
Ram actually has a really striking metric for measuring that stamina. He poses the question, if you can't sit with yourself for 10 minutes, how can you expect to stand strong in the world for 12 hours?
I love that quote. It completely flips the script on how we prepare for our days.
It really does. We usually try to gear up for the 12 hours of chaos by putting on more armor, by getting louder, faster, and more aggressive.
Yeah, drinking more coffee, listening to hype music.
Exactly. But Ram is saying the exact opposite. Your ability to withstand the 12 hours is entirely dependent on your ability to tolerate the 10 minutes of complete vulnerability.
Vulnerability is the strength.
It's like the engineering behind a deep-sea submersible. You don't survive the crushing pressure of the deep ocean just by building thicker, heavier outer walls.
Right.
You survive it by carefully calibrating the internal pressurization of the vessel before you ever drop it into the water. The internal pressure has to push back against the external chaos.
That's a brilliant way to picture it.
Does this mean peace isn't about avoiding the chaos of the world, but rather how tightly secured your foundation is before you walk into it? Because those 10 minutes of morning silence, sitting in the dark with your feet on the floor, that is the unseen internal pressurization.
Yes, absolutely. It's quiet, invisible work that nobody else ever witnesses. But that internal calibration dictates whether your hull holds strong or implodes when you spend 12 hours exposed to the elements. And this shifts our entire cultural definition of peace.
How so?
Notice that Ram and Vaneque don't call it fragile alignment. They use the word unshakable. Peace is not a state of blissful ignorance. It is not retreating to a quiet room in the woods and permanently hiding from society.
It's not running away.
No. Peace is the active, resilient presence of an aligned, unmasked self operating in the real world. You can weather the 12 hours of world chaos, the endless emails, the interpersonal conflicts, all the demands on your time, precisely because you spent the first 10 minutes anchored in your own truth.
Because the world is constantly going to try to hand you counterfeit loves. It will actively demand that you put your trauma masks back on. Because, let's face it, it's way more convenient for other people when you are overly accommodating or hyper-independent.
So true. But when your foundation is set in that morning silence, when you have established that baseline of contrast we talked about, the world cannot trick you into accepting a counterfeit. Vaneque's conclusion is that continuing to do this difficult, sometimes painful inner work is what ultimately brings you back into alignment.
And that alignment is the exact address where peace lives.
Exactly.
Which brings us right back to Ram's final summary of the entire process. Quiet the noise to hear the truth.
It sounds deceptively simple on paper, right? But as we've explored today, it is deeply confronting work. It requires real bravery.
Bravery to just sit there.
Bravery to face the silence, to sit with the discomfort of unplugging the noise machine, and to objectively look at the armor you've been wearing. But the reward for that bravery is an authentic life, completely free from the exhausting metabolic cost of constantly defending a false self.
So the progression here isn't about adding yet another arbitrary wellness task to your morning routine. We aren't just checking a box.
No, not at all.
It's about creating a baseline of silence so stark that the counterfeit habits in your afternoon suddenly feel entirely out of place. It starts with that 5-minute darkroom, have it feet on the floor, deep breaths, expressing gratitude, and basically just writing out the brain's desperate demand for distraction.
Riding out the panic.
Yeah, and then it moves into using that silence as an acoustic mirror to unmask the personality traits and reactions that were actually just built out of trauma and neglect. And it culminates in taking that heightened awareness into your day to actively identify and strip away the counterfeit loves and false pleasures.
You are systematically trading the illusion of safety for actual structural integrity.
And that brings it right back to you, the listener. We've laid out the mechanics of this daily plan. We've traced the psychological through line from the moment you wake up to the moment you step out into the chaos of your day.
The tools are right there.
Tomorrow morning, before the lights go on, before the screen lights up with a dozen notifications demanding your immediate reaction, and before the world demands your energy, you have a critical appointment with yourself. You have mechanical tools to start doing the actual inner work. You don't have to hijack your nervous system.
You can choose to establish the baseline. The silence is always waiting there. And while the initial drop into that silence might trigger your survival instincts, it is the only environment where your authentic voice can finally be heard over the roar of the engine.
As you prepare to tackle the rest of your day, or, as you set your alarm for tomorrow morning, I want to leave you with one final lingering question to ponder long after this audio stops. We spent a lot of time exploring how the morning quiet reveals the intricate, heavy armor we've been wearing, how the traits we proudly display are often just adaptations built to survive the unpredictable environments of our pasts. Think about the sheer energy it takes to carry that weight around for 12 hours a day. If just 5 or 10 minutes of dedicated silence can reveal that massive parts of who you think you are actually just protective layers, what incredible things might you discover you're capable of once you finally find the courage to take that armor off?